Well, Noni, I am delighted that you were able to join me in the studio today, talking about leadership. And I am such a fan of how you have stepped into this role at um, the moment that we're in right now. And, when we look at these dynamic and uncertain times, right, I think we're all tired of the word unprecedented. So I'm going to go with dynamic and uncertain. I would love to understand from your perspective. You have had experiences in a variety of industries and a variety of roles. What traits do you think are most important for a leader in this moment?
Well, first, thank you, Michelle, for having me. I'm really happy to have this conversation with you and appreciate your kind words. And as I reflected on leadership and what I think is important, for me, it really does come down to listening and really listening to hear and to understand. So much of our time is spent in some type of dialogue, in some type of meeting, and we're trying to drive to some end goal. And often that becomes kind of it just creates a dynamic that doesn't allow for listening. It doesn't allow for really, truly trying to understand the perspective that other folks are bringing, not listening with the intent to, well, let me think of what my response is going to be to that versus let me listen, let me try to understand, let me clarify, and then from there continue the discussion. So listening at the top of the list, and it sounds simple. It's so much harder than it is said. It's just really challenging to be intentional about the way that we interact with others and the way that we listen and being open to the perspective. I've personally done a lot of work. I've done work with teams on how do we ask questions in a way that are open? How do we allow and create an environment for that real dialogue back and forth? And then in addition to listening, it's really about how can we be empathetic, right? How can we try to put ourselves in someone else's position or understand how the dynamics might be impacting somebody else? The whole intention versus impact. And I'm very clear that anytime I'm participating in any kind of activity where we're trying to set the stage, and folks are always about like, well, let's honor the intention. And I'm like, yes. And at the same time, let's honor the impact, the fact that everything has an impact, whether it's intentional or not. And so I think those pieces. And then flexibility, right? Mm-hmm. Being able to be flexible, and it's something that's taken me a long time to learn. I think the longer in my career that I work in trying to be flexible, being open, and coming with real genuine curiosity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'd love to dive into each of these a little bit if we could, because each of these three are skills that take time to build, right, in a career and frankly in a lifetime. On the topic of listening, right, and how important it is to, as you've said, to listen, to really hear and not be caught up in the moment of the rush of deadlines or the pressures that we're in the midst of, but I'm listening to really hear and understand. How do you do that? Is there a process that you use as you're about to step into a meeting, or?
I mean, one is continuing to remind myself, this is what you're trying to do. I think with anything, understanding that we're not perfect and that we have to allow ourselves that. And if we fail or if I attempt to do it and I find myself going down the road of not doing that, pull yourself back, but also don't get caught in the like, oh, goodness, I did it again, right? So being able to have that ability and being very honest with folks, like, this is what I'm trying to do. I really am trying to be proactive and intentional about the way I listen. And if you find that I'm failing in some way, or I'm not doing that, or there's something that I'm doing or not doing that's creating a closed environment for you, please, right? Asking for folks to say, want to just give you a heads up that you said this at the beginning. And so trying to be honest and open about it, and while at the same time being able to know that we're each human, right? And so we may not always be successful or as successful as we want to be in what we're attempting, but that doesn't mean that we should quit. Should quit trying.
No, that's right. And what a great exercise in vulnerability, right? To offer an invitation to say, here's my intention, right? And as you said about impact versus intention, my intention is to be in a listening posture today and curious. I love this. And let me know if I'm not. Let me know if I'm not showing up that way. Great. Thank you. One other trait that you discussed as well was about flexibility. And, I find often, certainly in my own career, as well as the leaders that I work with, when we're under pressure is when I tend to go back to what's really comfortable. Right? I go back to my list making. I go back to the way I've always done things, when the moment might actually demand a different perspective or a flexible response versus what might be just comfortable for me, the leader. How do you stay flexible in moments, especially when you're feeling under pressure?
Yeah, and first I would agree with you that I feel like I have, both personally and professionally, it's something that I've worked on my entire life, because I do have a tendency to react when under stress, when under pressure, to just say, you know what, let me just take care of it. I'll just handle it, right? And I know that sounds familiar. I'm sure that will sound familiar for a lot of folks. Like, I'll just do it. Just let me do it. And I've learned that is probably not the most effective way to react. It also, I have learned over time, and I've tried to be very self-aware of when I start to feel those feelings, right? Like, we all know what those feelings are. We start to feel like, I'm really stressed, I'm feeling this pressure. And I know what would be comfortable for me to do. Now, doesn't mean that that is the right thing, or that it'll be comfortable for the people around me, for me to react in that way, right? To be very abrupt. And I actually, over the years, have shared with colleagues, let me tell you how I react in times of pressure and of stress. And let me assure you that is not the way that I want to show up. And I actually work to show up counter to that, right? Like, it's a practice for me. And again, I can't say that I've always done this, but I think in more recent times, I try to overcompensate and say, okay, if your tendency is to do X, Y, and Z, how about we do the 360 opposite of that? So how about we get really calm instead, right? And again, I can think of examples in my personal life where I've really done that, and the reaction has been like, wow, you're so calm. How can you be so calm? Well, because otherwise you wouldn't want to see what the opposite of that looks like. It's not great for you, and it's not great for me. I've also learned that what's comfortable often will, the reaction that other folks will have to it is not constructive, right? Because what they're getting is not constructive. It's not positive. And so how to pull back on that. And it's taken years, and I won't pretend that there aren't times where I might still fall into that. But I think that overall, I've been able to know enough, understand myself enough, be self-aware enough to say, no, you're starting to feel that way. Let's calm that, and let's take a different approach to it.
Yeah. Thank you. Because that combination of self-awareness, I can feel, right? I can feel my body reacting to something right now, and I need to listen to that, as well as then an invitation to say, this is not how I want to respond, right? I do love the suspicion with which your family responded to your calm reaction, though. That's like, what's happening here?
What's going on?
Yeah. No, and we all have those moments, right? Of, I need in this moment to choose a different reaction. And that's especially as a leader, when you know that all eyes are on you.
Yeah. It's exercising different muscles, right?
Yeah.
Exercising different muscles, that muscle of flexibility. Again, as leaders, we share a lot of characteristics, right? One of the reasons why we're in leadership positions, which is not necessarily synonymous with being a leader, but being in a leadership position means that there are expectations, right? And there are expectations of the fact that we set the tone very often, and that if we are creating a sense of anxiety or chaos, that is going to flow to the rest of the folks, right? And so I think that is part of it too, is recognizing that it's not just about how my reaction, but how's that going to impact the folks around me?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. So I would love to hear from your perspective. What one sort of unheralded skill or behavior, right? We talk a lot in the world of leadership about accountability and execution to timelines and deadlines and the like. When we think about the world of CDFIs and the investments that you are making in communities that would not otherwise have access to these financial resources, it takes a certain kind of leader to do this work well. So as you think about this space of finance, but also of community investments, what one unheralded skill or behavior do you think helps someone be really successful in this space?
I always find that going back to the why of why you're doing this work, what motivates you about doing this work, what inspires you about doing the work. The work is challenging, sometimes more than others, and being able to always center yourself in, why am I doing this, right? What is my hope? What is my goal for the impact of this work? And for those of us that have been in the work for a long time, over potentially a career, right? What might that be? And while the progress sometimes may seem slow, if we can look at it holistically, we can hopefully, right, recognize that there is positive impact, there is positive change, there is movement in, just as I think about my career, we have seen progressions, and it's not that we haven't had bumps. It's not that we haven't had issues. We have been able to respond to that. We've been able to persevere. We've been, we hear about resilience and how important it is to resilience, but really centering ourselves, for me, centering myself in the mission, into the why, and what has brought me to this work and why I've stayed in this work for so long. And we have a lot of folks, we have, talented folks in this field who've chosen this field. One, to come to it, and two, to stay in it. And I think for a lot of us, it's about the mission, and it's about the folks, right? The individuals, and how do we address injustices? I know for me, that was my early calling. It was really about injustice and racial inequity, and a lot of the topics that we hear today that maybe not in the way that we'd like to speak about them. But yeah, that really is for me where it all stems from and what drives the work on a daily basis.
Yeah. Thank you. And, there are a lot of young people that are interested in finding ways in their own careers to be a part of something that addresses the wealth gap, right, in our society, that addresses some of the social injustices. And they might not think about finance out of the gate, right? They might think about, well, it's social work, or I'm running a soup kitchen, right? I actually heard that from a young person. I'm like, no, there's so much more. What words of advice might you have to a young person who has the same why that you do, right? That is interested in really making an impact about why this sort of career path of finance, right, might also intersect with that social justice.
Sure. Yeah, and it's really interesting because as I speak to young people, especially now, I'll often say to them, I envy you, because I think there's a lot more awareness about our field. There's a lot more awareness about the social impact field, community development field, finance that is for a purpose versus finance that might be for from the more capitalistic outcomes. And so part of what I think is important is for us as leaders, for folks in the field, we need to do more to reach out. We need to make sure that we're talking to folks, that we are giving them exposure to internships and opportunities, because the more that we can do that, then I think our field will be better known, the work will be better known. I mean, I myself had the same experience. I thought of nonprofits as social service, and I thought of my career as, I'm going to work in the business field. And when I found, and I totally fell into it, that there was this intersection, I was amazed, and I thought, oh, this is exactly where I want to be. This is exactly the space I want to be in. And I think we have done a better job in the last couple of decades. There's more work that we can do, but really expose folks to that. And it's our responsibility, right, as leaders in this field, to make sure that we are bringing in younger folks that are earlier in their career, giving them opportunities to learn, to grow. We have a lot of folks that are early career, and they're raring to go, right? They want to jump into this work. They want to move fast. They want to learn quickly. They want to advance in their careers. And so it's part of our responsibility as leaders in our organizations to find more of those opportunities and provide that type of training and career advancement, and also to show them part of the paths that folks can maybe take as they move forward.
Yeah, and I agree with all of that. And I think what's interesting is how quickly the field has evolved, right? And will continue to.
Right.
And so if you find that you're in a space where the work is intellectually challenging, where it has the deep why, right, of hitting that social justice purpose, now also as it continues to evolve, you still have that opportunity to play in a space where you have to think creatively every single day in the work that you do, right? And still ensure that it hits the mission, right? That it hits the mark. So,
and we need those new voices too, and their new ideas and what they bring, because as you said, it evolves, and the environment and the ecosystem changes, and the challenges and the opportunities change. And so having newer voices coming in, newer experiences, different perspectives, it's the only way to ensure that our field and our work continues. It may look differently, and we have to be okay with that.
That's right. The work may look different. The outcome may also be different as far as what society needs in 5, 10, 15 years, right? Yeah. Good. Thank you. Back to the moment that we're in, there's this great old expression, right, about never waste a good disaster. And we've been through our share of disasters in our careers, right? So from a few recessions to a global pandemic, but in those moments, I find that the leaders that can help us see what opportunity exists in the midst of what may seem like just a moment to be despondent and to despair. That opportunity, what do you see that opportunity as in this moment?
It's challenging. First, we have to acknowledge it, right? That it is challenging, and it does feel, it feels different. I've been through the pandemic. I've been through the Great Recession. I'm like, I think I've had enough of my share, right? There are other bumps and whatnot. I'm like, I keep having these opportunities. Wow, I think I'm done with opportunities. I think we need to recognize that it's different, right?
That's right.
It very much feels different to me. And the tools that we've used before, I think, can be effective. Having said that, I think we also have to acknowledge that they may not completely be effective, and that we're in a situation that we maybe cannot completely either comprehend, plan for, right? I always come back to the fact that what is critically important as leaders is to ensure that our organizations are as strong as they can be, right? To be able to exist, right, in whatever the environment might be. And so ensuring that we have infrastructure, that we have the individuals, that we've planned, that we have built organizations that can sustain even through times like now where, I don't know that anyone can really tell us how this is all going to play out. And if they say they can, I'll question that, right? I'm like, oh, sure. Really? That'd be great if you could tell us, because I certainly don't have a sense. And being able to have those types of strengths and that ability is really key for whatever it is that's ahead, right? Yes. And I think sometimes too, trying to step back a bit versus because it seems like there's it's almost like this constant, right? There's this constant, okay, now it's this, now it's that, now it's that. And trying to step back a little bit and say, well, instead of kind of being in it in each day, each moment, how can we pull back and think a little bit more holistically, right? And what is it that we need to do for each one of our organizations? And then for us as a field, to ensure, again, that we've got that strength and we're forward thinking about what comes after this, right? Whenever that might be.
Yeah. And it's so important, right? That we have a view out to the future as best we can, but that we also have our feet grounded under us well enough to understand exactly what are the strengths and weaknesses of our own organization. And to do everything we can in whatever moment we have to strengthen and shore up that organization to be as strong as possible to weather the storm. And that can be hard to know. When am I investing in what element of if it's infrastructure or if it's staffing or if it's additional revenue sources, when to sort of pull that trigger.
Yeah, and focusing on diversifying and ensuring that we've got, the various, I would always think of things in levers, like what are the levers I can push and which ones do I push at which time and how do they align with each other, right? And so really understanding that about, I know a lot of folks have been doing scenario planning and we're, just trying to understand and again, 6 months ago, I'm not sure that anyone could have planned for where we are today, right? And today, maybe we can't plan for what is 6 months. But even just going through that exercise, again, is a muscle that we're consistently able to come back to, right? So that if it's in real time that we have to be reacting, we have that ability, right? That ability to think it through, to analyze. Sometimes we do have to do things quickly, right? We do have to make decisions in a shorter time span than we might want to. But being able to practice that, and that's why planning and being able to undertake scenario planning and think through, well, it could be A and it could be B and it could be C, and we don't know which of those three it is, but how would we react to each one of those, right? What is it we would need to do? What would we need to put in place? How do we build the organization for today and tomorrow and the next day?
Yeah. And to your point, if I've built the muscle of how to do the scenario planning as a team,
right.
Now if I need to do it quickly, as in we need a decision in the next hour, we now understand at least the steps we need to take as a team to go through that process together and to stay open-minded to various solutions. One of my clients the other day referred to it as the skill of learning to write left-handed.
Oh, yes.
Right? Whatever strength you think you have, perhaps you've overplayed it, right? How do we build a different kind of muscle in this moment that the moment sort of demands?
Right.
How do we do it quickly? Yeah. Thank you. Well, I know we are at time, and thank you for going over with me, Noni. Is there anything unsaid or that you'd like to get on the record, right, that we can share with the greater universe?
Sure. For me, it's again, every day waking up with a purpose, right? And every day, although we may not know what that day brings, continuing to guide ourselves with that purpose. And the thing is, there's going to be things that kind of knock us one way or knock us the other way. But at the end of the day, if we can say, well, today I did this to advance the work that's linked to the mission, that's really all we can expect of ourselves, and to continue to have grace for ourselves and for others, I think is really, really important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And to do it together, right? Because we can't stand alone in that storm.
Right.
So, yeah, true. Thank you so much, Noni.
Sure,
I so appreciate you.
Yeah,
Thank you for jumping in the studio with me. Truly, truly. And I think so much of what you've said is really going to resonate with folks. There's the questions that I've asked you are the questions I'm getting sort of on the regular. And so to hear it from someone who's in the seat every day, for those who don't have access to coaching or don't have access to leadership development, this is my way of hopefully sharing a little bit of that goodness with a broader audience. So
good for you.